student journey starting from the year 1939, and we will try to cover up to 1941. But meanwhile, I would like to bring to your notice one very important episode that we have neglected in the previous 3 years. And that episode was when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar took the oath of the office on June 19, 1937. He did not vow in the name of the Gita. He declined or rejected to take the oath in the name of Gita, but rather he took the oath in a very dignified manner without resorting to any religious book or any religious symbol of Hinduism then. So we have seen that period of 1937, 1936, 1937, 1938, 1939 was a very crucial period because Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar floated a political party. He became the member of the Bombay Legislative Assembly with 15 of his colleagues, and he represented in a very dominant Congress dominated Legislative Assembly. He tried to talk about the issues of the oppressed communities, and we have seen that it was very difficult because a lot of the people who became the member of the Bombay Provincial Assembly were not trained in the parliamentary procedures. Some of them were very illiterate, and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was, we can say, the most educated in the democratic methods. He was widely read. He read widely on the democratic issues and the parliamentary system. He was also instrumental or one of the major factors in getting through the Constitution of India, which was named as the Government of India Act 1935. Because he was so well equipped in those matters, he could easily made impact on the entire Bombay Legislative Assembly. But though there was a new constitution in India which came into being in 1935, we can call it the Constitution of India. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar referred to it as such, the Constitution of India. Though it had many limitations, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar decided to work within the framework of new constitution that came into force in 1935, because as we have seen that he firmly believed that the problems could be solved by the legal and the constitutional methods, and those problems could not be solved if there are the blockades in a way of discussions and debates between the people. So he saw the debates and the discussion as a necessary way forward to resolving even the social issues, because he was a firm believer in the democratic and the constitutional methods. So this attitude naturally got mirrored in when he participated in various debates of the Bombay Legislative Assembly. At that time in India there were 9 British provinces, and Bombay province was one of the very important provinces of the British Empire. So we have seen how he was very constantly engaged in the parliamentary sort of affairs. Also we have seen that he was busy in making his livelihood by working as the principal of the law college. Later on in 1939 he resigned because he found it just too much to engage on all different levels at a time. And we have seen that the world events were shaping up in such a way that the World War II was rising on the horizon, and we have seen Dr. Ambedkar's diplomatic response to the outside events as to what should be the terms of engagement of India in the war on the sides of the Allies. He defended the position of the Allies in their fight against the tyrannical forces of fascism and Nazism. And we have seen how carefully he worded his sort of response to the world events that were happening at that period of time. And that brings us to 1939, when the World War II is arising in the world. Also, in terms of the Indian situation, there was a constant debate whether there should be the federation or whether there should be a singular central power. So by the federation, I would like to explain this term to you. When we talk about the federation, the states become very autonomous and more powerful than the central government. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said that if we go for the federal structure at this juncture of time, it will weaken our power to engage with the British in terms of the independence of the country. Because if we go for the federation, you give so much power to the federal unit that your united power is crumbled. And when he gave a 2-hour speech in 1939 in the Gokhale Institute, which was later published as the Federation or Federalism in 1939, he clearly spoken against the federalism or federation, we can say, not against federalism but against federation. It's quite a complex political document if we look into that, but if we look into that very carefully, it gives us sort of a sense of nation or sort of a sense of state that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was thinking about India. So in 1940, on the brisk of the World War II, which broke out in Europe in 1939 with Germany attacking Poland, and British naturally wanted to have the support of Indians to fight the Axis powers or the Axis forces which were led by Germany. And Congress decided not to cooperate with the British. They wanted to make it a term that India should be given independence at that point of time. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar found that kind of a demand at that point of time in the late 1930s to have the complete independence a very dangerous idea, because that would have meant that India would not have the army. That means that India would have a very weakened military power, and it would be difficult to defend India against the Axis forces. And when the British government did not accede to the idea of the Congress, the Congress party decided to resign, decided to not take part in the democratic process that ensued after 1937 elections. And only after 2 years, the Congress government resigned and Jinnah became very happy. And Jinnah celebrated that day when the Congress party resigned as the day of deliverance. And Babasaheb Ambedkar mentioned that it was indeed a day of deliverance because he found the Congress rule very tyrannical. There were more atrocities committed against the Dalits. There was a lot of corruption, and the Congress governments were not efficient. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said that the Jinnah has celebrated the day of deliverance. In fact, he said that he would have liked to be the man to take credit to celebrate the day of deliverance, and he joined that day as the day of deliverance. So in 1939, the whole direction of Babasaheb's politics was very clear. So when in 1940, Lord Linlithgow interviewed 52 Indian leaders in order to talk about the future of Indian governance, the future of Indian politics, the future of India as a state, as a nation state. He interviewed Dr. Ambedkar, he interviewed Savarkar, he interviewed Mehta, so on and so forth. Lord Linlithgow, because the British government wanted to engage with the Indian leaders so as to get their much needed support for the war against the Axis forces. So when Lord Linlithgow interviewed Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Babasaheb Ambedkar very clearly registered his dissatisfaction. He said that he is very dissatisfied with the working of Pune Pact. He told Lord Linlithgow in 1940 that in the revised constitution he would like to reverse the position and not go along with the Pune Pact because it has done no good to the depressed classes. So he told the Governor General of India his viewpoint about the question of the Pune Pact. Very important thing happened here. When Lord Linlithgow issued a statement after meeting the 52 Indian leaders that after the end of the war, now in 1940, they didn't know when the war was going to end. So after the end of the war, Lord Linlithgow told the Indians or the Indian representatives that after the end of the war, there will be a new consultation that will take place with the Indian and the minorities will not be avoided at any cost. He added that there will be a consultative committee that would take into account the political parties in India. This period is very crucial to understand the politics of that period, because we can understand how Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar evolved and consolidated his position against the very caste Hindus who were very staunch defenders of the caste. They were trying to advocate the independence, but they were completely forgetting the equality existing in that country. They wanted the transfer of power to take place from the Britishers to their hands, and they were not concerned at all, we can say, as to how the power will be distributed among the Indians. And therefore, it's very important to understand Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's position when it was clear that the power was to be transferred from the Britishers to the Indians. So he said, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said that the minorities problem would never be solved unless Gandhi and the Congress gave up their egoistic and insolent attitude towards persons and parties outside the Congress. Because Congress wanted to show all the time that they are the sole representative of all the Indians, which was not the case, because there were several political parties contending for the power. There was Muslim League, there was Independent Labour Party, there were a couple of parties, there was a Justice Party, and so on and so forth. He said that patriotism was not a monopoly of congressmen, and therefore persons holding views divergent from the Congress had perfectly legitimate right to exist and be recognized. So it is not that the Congress is India, which Congress was trying to pose as they are the sole representative of the Indians. So this is a very crucial period, and keep this dimension in mind, that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was not ready to accept the claim that the Congress represented the interest of all Indians. He neither accepted the claim that the Congress represented the untouchables. And during that period, the Congress leader was trying to engage in dialogue with various leaders of the world, and in fact Nehru went to China to talk about the Indian future or the future of India, and met Chiang Kai-shek, the premier of China, that period of time. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said or made a very important statement during that period, which I am going to read for you. He said that Chiang Kai-shek has mentioned about the Indian independence, without even talking of major blockades to India's freedom. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar always added or accepted that there is a need for independent India. But how that is going to take place? Independence is okay. That's the legitimate demand which was accepted even by the British in 1917, that the Indians will be given right to rule themselves progressively and gradually. But how that was going to take place was the most important question than mere demanding the independence. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was more focused on how India will be independent and how the power will be transferred to the Indians, which means all the Indians, not just one particular side. So he was very critical of mere talk of independence, and he favored the process as to how the independence can be sought. So he criticized the meeting between Nehru and Chiang Kai-shek that took place in 1939, and we have seen in 1940 Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made his position clear with respect to the Pune Pact, that in the revised constitution he would like to see that the Pune Pact is reversed. And also Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made it clear that the demand of the minority or the need of the minority must be taken into account when the power will be transferred to the Indians. I am repeating this all the time because these facts are very important for us to keep in mind. Naturally, the proposal of the Lin-Lithgow of Governor of General was not accepted by the Congress, because Congress was very eager to get the political power. How to get that political power was not an important question for them. And at the same time, in the 1939, if we look at the Muslim scenario of that period, the idea of Pakistan was taking shape. So in 1939, Rahmat Ali and other Muslims came up with the idea of Pakistan. Jinnah supported that idea. The famous poet Muhammad Iqbal also came to support the idea of Pakistan. And Dr. Babasaheb's mind, which was very tuned with the contemporary event, understood the gravity of the situation as to how the partition of India or the creation of Pakistan is going to affect the total political body of this country. So in 1940, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar wrote a very important book titled as Thoughts on Pakistan or Partition of India. So the first edition of that book came in 1940, because the Muslim League and the Muslim leaders were talking about the Pakistan. In that book, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar elaborated the history of the emergence of this kind of a view that the Muslims are the separate nation. And he wrote this book so clearly, taking into account various facts, that this book became so famous that it was used as a textbook not only by Jinnah, not only by even the British, but even Gandhi used it as a textbook on the Pakistan problem. So we can see that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is not just concerned about the problem of the depressed classes. Of course, he is very much concerned about the problems of the depressed classes. It was the problem that he wanted to solve. But he was not cut off from the other problems which would have direct impact not only on the untouchables but on the Indians in general. And we have seen what had happened as a result of the partition of India. Also in the late 1930s saw a meeting between Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Nehru. That was the first meeting between Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Nehru, where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar jokingly called Nehru as the fourth standard boy. He compared intelligence of Nehru as the fourth standard boy. So in a meeting that took place in 1939, Dr. Babasaheb, in a conference that was held, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made very important statements which I am going to read thorough. Ambedkar then described how the majority were denying liberty, equality and fraternity for the growth of the untouchables. He told the House that out of 100 Mamlatdars, only one was from depressed classes. Out of 34 Mahalkaris, none was from them. Out of 246 head clerks, none was from them. Out of 2,444 revenue clerks, only 30 were from his class. Out of 829 PWD clerks, only 7 were from scheduled caste. In the excise department, 3 out of 189. Out of 538 police inspectors, only 2. Out of 33 deputy collectors, only 1 was from the scheduled caste. So that was the condition of the scheduled caste in 1939. No representation in the government. And then he further declared, I know my position has not been understood properly in the country. It has been misunderstood. Let me therefore take this opportunity to clarify my position. Sir, I say that whenever there has been a conflict between my personal interest and the interest of the country as a whole, I have always placed the claims of the country above my personal claims. I have never pursued the path of private gain. If I had played my cards well as others do, I might have been in some other place. I do not want to say about it, but I did not do it. There were colleagues with me at the round table conferences who, I am sure, would support what I say, that so far as the demands of the country are concerned, I have never lagged behind. Many European members who were at the conference rather felt embarrassed that I was infant terrible of the conference. He was a terrible infant or a terrible child at the conference. That's what the European members felt when he talked about the country, because he was stood for the country in the round table conferences. And in one of the very important remarks that he made, that the latter generations of the Indians will come to know that there was no patriotic like him in that country. Because if we look at the proceedings of the round table conferences, Gandhi defended the interest of the princess, while Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was defending the interest of the common man. He was talking on the behalf of the common man. He was talking for the transfer of power to the common man. He was talking about the adult franchise. He was talking about giving the right to all Indians to vote, while while Gandhi wanted to seize that power when he favored the princess. When he told to the round table conferences that the princess should have the power to decide the future of the princely states, not the common masses living in those particular princely states. And there were 563 princely states in India. So I am going to read further. But I will also leave no doubt in the minds of the people of this country that I have another loyalty to which I am bound and which I can never forsake. That loyalty is the community of untouchables in which I am born, to which I belong, and which I hope I shall never desert. And I say this to this House as strongly as possibly can, that whenever there is any conflict of interest between the country and the untouchables, so far as I am concerned, the untouchables' interest will take precedence over the interest of the country. I am not going to support a tyrannizing majority simply because it happens to speak in the name of the country. I am not going to support a party because it happens to speak in the name of the country. I shall not do that. Let everybody here and everywhere understand that this is my position. As between the country and myself, the country will have precedence. As between the country and the depressed classes, the depressed classes will have precedence. The country will have no precedence. That's all that I wanted to say with regard to these amendments of mine, because he was putting forth an amendment in the House.